Welcome back to my workshop. And today we're in the kitchen because we're going to make a Postman Pat cake. So let's go. So today we've made our way into the kitchen because we're going to make a Postman Pat cake for my grandson. And here's my extensive plans. So we're going to make this Postman Pat cake. So let's get some bits and pieces together. Let's see what I need. So here's some of the bits and pieces I'm going to need. First of all, a cake, two quite large cakes, a cake board, using a 12-inch round cake board, some knives, my toolbox, which has got all my tools in it, some food colouring for colouring the icing. I use sugar flare icing colouring, a couple of pens which are food safe licorice coloured pens, my neoprene rolling out table, rolling out mat, this is excellent, and some gloves. Right, let's start making a cake. So as soon as I got on my Frank's Little Workshop apron, I got my two pieces of cake, which are quite large. These were cooked by my wife, Jane. She did a very good job on these. The cake was very nice. And I started carving it into a rough van shape. So obviously this is the Postman Pat van shape. So here I had to raise up the cake a little bit to make way for the wheels, because otherwise they would have been completely on the bottom of the cake. So just a little bit of padding at the bottom. Then I proceeded to cover the whole thing in ganache. Now the ganache is just basically cream and chocolate melted together, and you leave it to dry or to cool down quite a little bit, and then you can spread it, and then obviously the more you spread it, it gets harder, and it eventually sets. You can get this to a nice shiny smooth surface if you spend enough time on it, but this is obviously just to cover underneath the icing. Trying to get it as smooth as possible so I didn't have too many lumps and bumps underneath the icing. Obviously if this is going to be a flat cake, the smoother you make it, the more of a mirror finish you're going to get with your final icing. But for the purpose of this cake, it's for a 2-year-old's birthday party, so this should be enough. Had a quick clear away here and cleaned off my neoprene rolling mat, and then started mixing some of the icing. I started off, I mixed the red for the outside of the van, and then I mixed some of the blue, which was going to be the Postman Pat colour. Used a few different types of icing here as a bit of a trial, but the best one was Dr. Oetker, coloured with sugar flare colouring. It does give you quite a nice colouring, but the problem is it was a very hot weekend, so it did dry out very quickly. Now there's the basic shape of the van there, covered in icing. Right, had a bit of a disaster there. My camera decided it wasn't going to save the video, so you missed the part where I actually covered the whole thing in icing. I've covered it in the red icing, cut the holes out for the wheels, and then started doing the profiles for the doors, and I've cut out the windows. They'll be filled with icing later. So I'm going to call it a day there, and then tomorrow I'll do some more. So I left it for a while, and then just quickly checking my phone there for some pictures of the Postman Pat's van, just so I could get an idea of the remainder of the windows and the back doors. And then all I've done is I've used a small modelling tool to mark out lines where the door goes, where the bonnet goes, and where the rear doors are, and then just basically mark those out. Now here I'm making some grey icing, and now this is going to be for the windows. I couldn't decide whether to do black or grey. ended up, I decided on grey to try and make it look like a window. So basically had a quick measure up of the window size, then heated up a little bit of marmalade in the microwave for a couple of seconds just to make it slightly sticky. Then using a brush, just brushed it into place. I could have used some confectioner's glue, but this was just as easy. Basically pushed in the icing into the position of the windows, and then trimmed around the edges just to try and get it as flat as possible. As I say, I could have spent a lot more time on this to get them as flat as possible, but they were slightly bobbly because obviously the ganache underneath, but it was okay. It was fit for purpose. So that's the windscreen, the 2 rear windows and the 2 side windows done. Now this slightly darker grey, mixed up a little bit more black into the icing there. Slightly darker grey was going to be for the road that the van is sitting on. Now doing it this way was probably a bad idea. What I should have done is actually done the cake board first and then put the cake on top of it, because doing it this way you end up with a bit of a patchwork. I know that makes it more realistic because the roads nowadays are quite a patchwork, but I'd suggest doing the board first. Now I've mixed even more black into the icing, and I'm now doing the wheels. First of all, I quickly measured the wheels up, but they were actually too big by the time I flattened them down. The idea was just to have some wheels with some white centre caps, but they turned out to be too big, so I've had to cut them down and then try and make them circular again. That had a problem with these wheels because the icing was so thick and it was so hot that as soon as I put the wheels in place, they started to sink, so it looked like he had flat tyres, and I couldn't actually do anything about that. The only way I could have done it would have been to leave them overnight to dry. I mean, there's no actual weight on the wheels here, but you'll see that they actually start to sink and look like they've got flat tyres. But basically put the wheels in place, cut some very small white circles, just pushed them into the centre of the hubs. You did see me put a little bit of icing inside the wheel arches there, just so there was no cake visible around the wheels. Now started to model Jess the cat. So this is Postman Pat's little cat. This was just basically making it up as I go along. The only picture I have was the one in front of me there, so just basically getting an idea. And it turned out that the cat, although it looked very much like Jess, it was a bit fat. So it was a fat Jess the cat. And also another problem I had was I was going by the picture I'd printed off, and that picture had the cat had yellow eyes. So I've made yellow eyes. The problem is Jess has got green eyes, but our printer has run out of green ink, so it basically printed in yellow, so I made it with yellow. So the idea is to do your research before you start doing anything like this, because if you get it wrong, small children will always find you out. So basically modelled a little cat here. There I was just doing the texture for his fur. Turned out okay, a bit of a startled look and quite fat, but it was okay. Now this is the front and the rear bumpers. Just basically measured the width of the vehicle, and then made some long grey squares, and then I actually left these for a little while to dry. As I say, it was a hot day, I left them on the windowsill just to dry so they didn't sag like the tyres did. Then rolled out some black. This was just to act as trims around the windows. I was originally going to pipe this, but I thought I'd just quickly do the rolling out some black icing and put it around the edges. I'm sure piping would have been a nice finer edge, but it would have taken a lot longer. So I just did it this way. Now I was actually using confectioner's glue here instead of marmalade, because it actually dries clear, whereas using a marmalade it can dry a little bit orangey. So trimmed around all the front windscreen, the two rear windows and the side doors, Obviously it's not the finest of lines, but it's sufficient. Then sticking on the bumpers, and then the front bumper, obviously it was quite thick, so you can see me using a rule there for leveling it up, and then I've just put a couple of pieces of icing underneath it just to hold it in place while the glue dries. Then started doing the front grille, and this was obviously done out of the same icing that the windscreen was done out of, and then just used the icing pen, which is basically, it's a licorice colour, or it's called licorice, and it's also from Sugar Flare, and you just use it like a normal felt tip pen, but it's completely edible. And then I just basically traced around all of the indentations for the doors and the bonnet, as you can see here. I can see I've got the headlights in, and also the indicators, and then on the back I did the rear lights, which are just a couple of little grey square circles, then with little red and little yellow circles pushed into them to look like reflectors. A couple of little wiper blades, which were just little strips of black, and then the grass base for the front of the cake. Again, it was just mixed up with some Sugar Flare icing colouring, and then rolled down, put onto the board. So now I started to make the actual Postman Pat. Now I've got to give a shout out here to a pattern that I sort of copied, and it was let's just quickly find it. I think it was called Lynz cakes. Yeah, Lynz cakes, which is on YouTube. If you just make a search for Postman Pat cake topper and look for Lynz cakes, or cakes by Lynz, and I basically followed her rough design here with how she designed the head and the face and the hair, etc. I obviously haven't made as good a job as she's made, but it was easy enough to do. But because the icing was quite heavy, first of all I put a stick through the middle to actually support it, and basically that kept on pushing its way through his head, so that wasn't too good. The hair was just made out of little orange bobbles stuck on, so it looked like he had curly orange hair. I made the hat slightly too small here. I should have made that just a little bit bigger. That was just basically made up of one black circle squashed down for his peak, and then two blue circles for the top and the top of his cap. The body and the legs were made out of the icing I rolled earlier on. Just basically formed it into Postman Pat shaped. Obviously his legs are separate to his body, and then just basically joined it all together with a combination of confectioner's glaze, confectioner's adhesive, and marmalade. Just drawing on some of the details here for his pockets. The actual bit for his shirt was just a plain piece of white icing, cut a V out below his face, and then just push the white triangle into that area to look like a shirt, and then use the pen again just to draw on the tie and the collar. So with a couple of hands and some black blobs for feet, that was Postman Pat almost done. The icing was quite thick, so I had to leave that to one side for quite a while to dry. Now using the remainder of the grey icing I'd made earlier on, just mixed in some random more black icing with it and formed it into block shapes, which were obviously going to be used for the brick wall. There's a little bit of a wall at the front and a little bit of a wall at the back. It was just to give the cake some sort of scenery, but it also covered up the fact that the tyres look flat. This is my first ever attempt at piping icing. It went okay. It was all freehand, but yeah, it worked okay. And this was obviously for Monty's birthday, and it's his second birthday, so we'll have a number 2 there. So now Postman Pat, the only thing missing off him was a pair of glasses, so I've actually used, this is the only non-edible part of the cake, a little piece of wire wrapped around a drill, formed a little pair of glasses, and that was it. And this is the final product. It's okay. It's a bit wibbly wobbly, and obviously where it was it's quite heavy, it actually started sinking with the heat, but overall the effect is quite good. Yeah, I'm pleased. Just the cat was a bit fat, but the cake itself was really nice. So just a quick zoom in here. One of my trademarks is a little just the cat poo. So that's it, the cake's all finished. It's been quite fun to do, it's taken quite a while. A few things I've noticed. The icing team seems to crack up very quickly, probably because it's been really hot the weekend. And also the weight of the tyres has made it sink, so it looks like it's got flat tyres. But that's all finished, so quite pleased with it. So thank you for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye. Say hello, Jane.
Hello, Jane.